Teacher Talking Sports here, and while we have 1 week left in the NFL regular season, most fantasy football seasons ended in week 17. Of course, a lot of guys sit out, a lot of guys leave early in the final week, thus, fantasy seasons end a week early. In this video, we're going to take a look at the best players who were mostly not drafted, so we could call it the all mostly weren't drafted fantasy team for 2021. I'll be naming one quarterback, two running backs, two wide receivers, and a tight end in this video who will make the team. Of course, I didn't say all not drafted at all. Some of these guys may have been drafted in your league, but for the most part, these guys started the year off on the waiver wire and probably helped a lot of people to fantasy playoff appearances and in some instances fantasy championships. So let's get into it, starting with the quarterback. We're going to go with Derek Carr of the Las Vegas Raiders. Not exactly the highest touchdown total. He has 21 touchdown passes, which is tied for 13th. But he has a very large amount of passing yards, 4,618. So he's an outside chance for 5,000. That's fourth in the NFL, and he's just 30 yards behind second place. He has 6 games this year with at least 323 passing yards and 7 multi-TD games. Derek Carr is having an awesome season for the Raiders as they try to win it and get in the postseason. Next, running back, and he may have been eligible at wide receiver in some leagues as well. Cordarrelle Patterson of the Atlanta Falcons, the longtime veteran, finally had an opportunity to play a larger role in offense, and he capitalized. He had 607 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns on the year thus far. 1 game left. And also had 51 catches for 547 yards and 5 touchdowns, making him extremely valuable in PPR leagues. He did slow down a bit over the past few weeks, but his body of work gets him on here. He had 5 games this season with at least 100 yards from scrimmage. Next, we got Elijah Mitchell is the other running back from the 49ers. 6th round rookie. When Raheem Mostert went down with a season-ending injury, most assumed that third-round pick Trey Sermon would take over the bell cow duties. Instead, it was the 6th-rounder Mitchell. And even though he only has played in 10 games, he has been extremely productive. 878 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns. So an outside chance at 1,000 yards despite missing 6 games. He had 5 games with over 100 rushing yards and 2 games with 5 receptions. Elijah Mitchell's the other running back on here. A couple others I'd like to mention: Sony Michel and Devontae Freeman. Honorable mention at quarterback, we could name Carson Wentz. I meant to mention that. 2 wide receivers. We're starting with Hunter Renfrow of the Las Vegas Raiders. What a year he has been having thus far. With 1 week left, he has 99 catches, which is tied for 7th in the NFL, 1,025 receiving yards, which is 18th, and 7 TDs, which is tied for 18th. And he's been very consistent. He's had a lot of productive games. He has at least 6 catches in 10 games, again, making him very valuable in PPR leagues. Next, we got Christian Kirk, the other wide receiver on this team. Christian Kirk has 75 catches on the year, which is tied for 22nd. 939 yards, 26th, has a chance for 1,000 yards, and 5 receiving touchdowns. He also has 22 catches in the last 3 games, which coincided with a lot of fantasy playoff leagues, so he was very productive during those games. And he had 11 games with at least 4 receptions, so most days he had a high floor. Shout out to Amon-Ra St. Brown. If we only went by the last 4 or 5 games, he definitely would have been on here. But since it was the entire body of work, he gets an honorable mention. But what an end to the season he has been having. And lastly, our tight end, we are going to go with Dalton Schultz of the Dallas Cowboys. Among tight ends, his 75 catches are third, his 787 receiving yards are sixth, and his 6 TDs are tied for sixth. That's all amongst tight ends. Also was productive in fantasy playoffs, 22 catches and 2 touchdowns over his last 3 games. He's had 8 catches with at least 8 games with at least 6 catches and 9 games with at least 50 yards receiving. So Dalton Schultz, a lot of people believe with Blake Jarwin coming back wouldn't play as large a role because he was productive in 2020 as well, but Blake Jarwin didn't play much of a role, got hurt, and Schultz performed extremely well and is one of the most productive tight ends in the league, a position that was very bare bones for a lot of the season. So that's it. That is our all mostly not drafted fantasy team. Quarterback Derek Carr, running backs Cordarrelle Patterson, Elijah Mitchell, wide receivers Hunter Renfrow, Christian Kirk, and tight end Dalton Schultz. Let me know in the comments below if any of those guys helped you to a fantasy playoff or fantasy championship appearance, or if someone I did not name that you picked up off waivers helped you into the playoffs. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, share the video, hit the bell for notifications. I'm out.